In a small village in Nigeria, there lived two brothers named Tom and Jack. They were happy boys, living with their parents, Mr. and Mrs. Johnson. The Johnson family was well known in the village because they owned many properties and businesses. They had a big house, farms, shops, and even a small factory. Tom and Jack had everything they needed and more. But the boys' uncle, a man named David, was very jealous of his brother's success. Uncle David had always wanted to be rich, but he was lazy and didn't want to work hard. He would often visit the Johnson family, pretending to be happy for them, but inside he was filled with envy and hate. One day, when Tom was 15 and Jack was 14, something terrible happened. Uncle David came to visit, bringing a gift of palm wine for Mr. and Mrs. Johnson. What the parents didn't know was that Uncle David had put poison in the wine. After drinking it, both Mr. and Mrs. Johnson became very sick and died within a few days. Tom and Jack were heartbroken. They couldn't believe their parents were gone. They cried for days and didn't know what to do. Uncle David pretended to be sad too, but he had an evil plan. "Don't worry, boys," Uncle David said, patting their heads. "I'll take care of you now." But Uncle David was lying. Instead of taking care of Tom and Jack, he started taking all the things that belonged to their parents. He sold the big house and moved the boys into a small, old room with just one bed. He sold the farms, the shops, and the factory. He took all the money and kept it for himself. Tom and Jack were left with nothing. They had no food, no money, and only the clothes on their backs. Uncle David told them they were old enough to take care of themselves now. "But Uncle David," Tom said, "what about all of our parents' properties? Shouldn't we get those?" Uncle David laughed. "Your parents owed me a lot of money," he lied. "All of this barely covers what they owed. You boys should be thankful I'm letting you stay in this room for free." Tom and Jack knew their uncle was lying, but they were just boys. They didn't know how to fight back or who to ask for help. So they had to figure out how to survive on their own. Every day, the two brothers would wake up early and go into the bush near their village. They would look for anything they could eat or sell. They picked fruits like mangoes and oranges. They dug up yams when they could find them. They caught snails, which many people in the village liked to eat. It was hard work, and often dangerous. There were snakes in the bush, and sometimes they would run into angry farmers who thought the boys were stealing from their land. Tom and Jack would try to explain that they were just looking for wild fruits and vegetables, but sometimes the farmers would chase them away anyway. At the end of each day, the boys would take what they had found to the village market. They would sell most of it, keeping only a little bit of food for themselves. With the money they made, they would buy a little rice or beans to eat with the fruits and vegetables they had kept. Life was very hard for Tom and Jack. They were always hungry and tired. Their clothes became old and torn. They couldn't go to school anymore because they had no money for books or uniforms. But they never gave up. They promised each other that one day, things would get better. One day, about 6 months after their parents died, Tom and Jack were deep in the bush looking for food. They had walked farther than usual because they hadn't found much close to the village. Suddenly, Jack spotted something strange. "Tom, look," he called to his brother. "What's that over there?" Tom came running over. In a small clearing, sitting all by itself, was a big clay pot. It was painted with bright colors and strange symbols. "That's weird," said Tom. "Why would someone leave a nice pot like that out here in the bush?" As the boys got closer to the pot, something even stranger happened. They heard a voice. "Hello there, young ones," said the voice. Tom and Jack jumped back, scared. They looked around, but there was no one else in the clearing. "Who said that?" asked Jack, his voice shaking. "I did," said the voice, and this time the boys realized it was coming from the pot. Tom and Jack couldn't believe their eyes and ears. A talking pot. They had heard stories about magic when they were little, but they had never believed those stories were true. What are you?" asked Tom, trying to sound brave. The pot chuckled. It was a warm, friendly sound that made the boys feel a little less scared. "I am a magical pot," it said. I have been waiting here for someone worthy to find me. A magical pot, said Jack. What do you do? I produce food, said the pot. Any kind of food you want. All you have to do is ask. Tom and Jack looked at each other, their eyes wide. Could this be true? They were so hungry. They had been living on barely enough food to survive for months now. Can we try? Asked Tom. Of course, said the pot. Just tell me what you want. The boys thought for a moment. Then Jack said, can you make pounded yam and egusi soup? Suddenly, the most delicious smell filled the air. The boys watched in amazement as the pot filled up with steaming hot pounded yam and a rich, tasty egusi soup. There was even some fresh fish in the soup. Tom and Jack couldn't believe their luck. They sat down right there in the clearing and ate until their bellies were full for the first time in months. It was the best meal they had ever tasted. Thank you, magical pot, said Tom when they were finished. You don't know how much this means to us. I'm glad I could help, said the pot. But I sense that you boys need more than just one meal. Would you like to take me home with you? Can we? Asked Jack excitedly. You'd really come with us? Of course, said the pot. I am here to help those in need, and I can see that you two have been through a lot. So Tom and Jack carefully carried the pot back to their little room. From that day on, their lives began to change. The pot made them breakfast, lunch, and dinner every day. They never went hungry again. The pot could make any kind of food they asked for, from simple rice and beans to fancy dishes they had only seen in rich people's houses before. But Tom and Jack didn't keep all the food for themselves. They remembered how hard it was to be hungry, so they started sharing with other poor people in the village. They would invite old people who had no family to care for them to come and eat. They would give food to other children who had no parents. The boys also started selling some of the food in the village market. The pot's food was so delicious that people would line up to buy it. With the money they made, Tom and Jack were able to buy new clothes and school supplies. They started going to school again, which made them very happy. They studied hard and did well in their classes. As the weeks went by, Tom and Jack started to look healthier. The skin glowed, and they had more energy. They even started to grow taller. People in the village noticed the change in the boys, and many were happy to see them doing well. But not everyone was pleased with their success. Uncle David had been living in the big house that used to belong to Tom and Jack's parents. He had been enjoying all the money he got from selling their properties. He thought the boys would probably die or run away, and he would never have to worry about them again. But one day, Uncle David saw Tom and Jack in the village. They were wearing new clothes and looked healthy and happy. This made Uncle David very angry. He decided to find out what was going on. The next day, when he knew the boys would be at school, Uncle David went to their small room. He looked around, trying to find out how the boys were suddenly doing so well. That's when he saw the colorful pot in the corner. What's this? He said to himself. I've never seen this pot before. It looks expensive. To his shock, the pot answered him. I am a magical pot, it said. I can produce any food you want. Uncle David's eyes lit up with greed. Oh really? He said. Show me. The pot filled up with a feast fit for a king. There was jollof rice, fried chicken, plantains, and all sorts of delicious foods. Uncle David ate until he couldn't eat any more. Then he had a wicked idea. This pot is too good for those boys, he thought. I should keep it for myself. Then I can sell even more food and become even richer. So Uncle David picked up the pot and started to leave. But as he reached the door, he tripped and dropped the pot. It fell to the floor and broke into many pieces. When Tom and Jack came home from school that day, they found the broken pot. They were heartbroken. They had lost their magical friend and their source of food and income. That night, they went to bed hungry for the first time in weeks. What are we going to do now, Tom? Asked Jack, trying not to cry. I don't know, said Tom. But we can't give up. We'll think of something. The next day, the boys had to go back into the bush to look for food again. They were very sad, but they knew they had to keep trying to survive. As they were walking through the bush, Jack spotted something strange. It was a long, thin cane, standing up by itself in the middle of a clearing. "Tom, look at this," said Jack. "It's just like when we found the pot." The boys approached the cane carefully. "Hello," called Tom. "Are you magical too?" To their amazement, the cane answered. "Yes, I am," it said. "I am a magical cane." "What do you do?" asked Jack. "I flog people," said the cane. The boys looked at each other, confused. "What does that mean?" asked Tom. "I'll show you," said the cane. And suddenly, it sprang to life. It started hitting the boys, not hard enough to really hurt them, but enough to surprise them. It hit their arms and legs, tearing their clothes a little. "Ouch!" cried Jack. "Please stop." The cane stopped immediately. "I'm sorry," it said. "I was just showing you what I can do. I only flog bad people who deserve it." Tom and Jack thought for a moment. Then Tom had an idea. "I think we should take this cane home," he said to Jack. "Maybe it can protect us from Uncle David." Jack agreed, so they took the cane home. They put it by the door, hoping it would scare their uncle if he tried to come in again. The next day, Uncle David came to check on the boys. He was surprised to see them looking sad and hungry again. He thought they might have hidden the magical pot somewhere else. He saw the cane by the door and picked it up. "What's this?" he asked. "Another magical thing." "I am a magical cane," said the cane. "I flog people." Uncle David laughed. "I don't believe you," he said. "That pot was one thing, but a cane that flogs people. Impossible. Show me what you can do." The cane immediately sprang to life. It started hitting Uncle David hard, much harder than it had hit the boys. It hit him all over his body, leaving cuts and bruises. Uncle David screamed and tried to run away, but the cane followed him. Uncle David ran through the village, with the cane chasing him and hitting him the whole way. People came out of their houses to see what all the noise was about. They saw Uncle David running and screaming, with a cane floating in the air behind him, hitting him over and over. Finally, Uncle David ran to the police station. He was bleeding and his clothes were torn. He told the police that Tom and Jack had attacked him with a magical cane. The police came and arrested Tom and Jack. The boys were very scared. They tried to explain about the magical cane and the magical pot, and how their uncle had stolen all their parents' properties. But the police didn't believe them. "Magic isn't real," said one of the police officers. "You boys are lying to cover up your crime." Just as the police were about to take the boys away, the cane appeared. It started flogging the police officers, who ran away in fear. Then it turned to Uncle David and started hitting him again. "Stop," cried Uncle David. "I'll tell the truth. I poisoned my brother and his wife. I stole all their properties. I left these poor boys with nothing. I'm sorry." The police were shocked. They arrested Uncle David and started investigating his crimes. They found out that everything the boys had said was true. They recovered all the properties that Uncle David had stolen and returned them to Tom and Jack. The boys were overjoyed. They moved back into their parents' big house and started managing the businesses their parents had left them. They worked hard and studied hard, and grew up to be successful and kind men. They never forgot how it felt to be poor and hungry, so they always helped other people in need. They set up a charity to help orphans and poor families in their village and other villages nearby. As for the magical objects, the cane stayed with Tom and Jack to protect them. But they never saw the magical pot again. Sometimes, though, when they smelled a particularly delicious meal, they would remember their old friend and smile. And that's the story of Tom and Jack, two orphan boys who faced great hardship but found help in the most unexpected places. They learned that even in the darkest times, there is always hope. And they never forgot to be kind and helpful to others, just as the magical pot and cane had been kind and helpful to them. Years passed, and Tom and Jack grew into fine young men. They finished school and even went to university, studying business so they could better manage their parents' properties. They turned the small factory into a big company that employed many people from their village and the surrounding areas. But they never forgot where they came from. Every year, on the anniversary of the day they found the magical pot, they would host a big feast for all the poor and orphaned children in the area. They would tell their story, leaving out the magical parts, and encourage the children to stay strong and keep hoping for a better future. One day, when Tom and Jack were in their 30s, they decided to visit the bush where they had found the magical pot and cane. They walked for hours, trying to find the exact spots, but everything looked different now that they were grown up. As they were about to give up and go home, they heard a familiar voice. "Hello, young ones," said the voice. "Although I suppose you're not so young anymore." Tom and Jack turned around and saw the magical pot, sitting in a clearing just like it had been all those years ago. "Is it really you?" asked Tom, hardly daring to believe it. "It is," said the pot. "I've been waiting for you to come back." "But why?" asked Jack. "We've done well for ourselves now. We don't need your help anymore." The pot chuckled. "Who said anything about helping you?" It said, "I'm here to congratulate you. You've done well with the gifts you were given. You've helped others and stayed kind, even when life was hard. That's what I was hoping for when I let you find me all those years ago." Tom and Jack felt tears in their eyes. They had never thought they would see their old friend again. "Thank you," said Tom. "We wouldn't be where we are today without you." "Oh, I think you would," said the pot. "You boys always had it in you to succeed. I just gave you a little push in the right direction. Now, how about one last meal for old time's sake?" Answer: Tom and Jack sat down in the clearing and enjoyed a wonderful meal from their magical friend. As they ate, they talked about old times and all that had happened since then. When they were done, the pot spoke one last time. "It's time for me to go now," it said. "There are other children out there who need my help. But remember, the real magic was inside you all along. It was your kindness, your hard work, and your love for each other that got you where you are today." With that, the pot disappeared. Tom and Jack walked home, feeling happy and grateful for all they had been through and all they had achieved. From that day on, whenever life got hard or they faced a difficult decision, Tom and Jack would remember the pot's last words. They would remind each other that they had the power to overcome any obstacle, as long as they stayed true to themselves and to each other. Answer: Tom and Jack lived long and happy lives, always working to make their village and their country a better place. They never saw the magical pot or cane again, but they didn't need to. They had learned their lessons well, and they carried the magic of kindness and perseverance in their hearts always. As for Uncle David, he spent many years in prison for his crimes. When he finally got out, he was an old man. To his surprise, Tom and Jack offered him a small house to live in and a job at their company. They had forgiven him, though they could never forget what he had done. At first, Uncle David was suspicious. He couldn't understand why the nephews he had wronged so terribly would show him kindness. But as time passed, he began to see how much Tom and Jack had changed the village for the better. He saw how they treated everyone with respect and kindness, even those who had nothing to offer in return. Slowly, Uncle David began to change. He worked hard at his job, grateful for the second chance he had been given. He even started volunteering at the orphanage Tom and Jack had built, telling his story as a warning to others about the dangers of greed and jealousy. One day, many years later, when Tom and Jack were in their 50s, they received an invitation to visit the capital city. The president of Nigeria wanted to honor them for the charitable work and their contributions to the country's economy. As they prepared for their trip, Tom turned to Jack and said, "Can you believe how far we've come? From orphans in the bush to meeting the president." Jack smiled. "It's amazing," he said. "But you know what? I think I was happiest that day we found the magical pot. Not because of the food, but because for the first time since our parents died, we had hope again." Tom nodded. "You're right," he said. "That pot taught us that help can come from unexpected places. And the cane taught us about justice. But it was up to us to take those lessons and do something with them." When they arrived in the capital, Tom and Jack were overwhelmed by the grand reception they received. The president himself greeted them, shaking their hands and thanking them for all they had done for Nigeria. During the ceremony, the president asked Tom and Jack to speak about their journey. As they stood at the podium, looking out at the crowd of important people, the brothers felt a moment of nervousness. But then they looked at each other, nodded, and began to tell their story. They spoke about losing their parents and being left with nothing. They talked about their struggles to survive and the determination to make a better life for themselves. They mentioned the kind people who had helped them along the way, though they left out the parts about the magical pot and cane. "We stand here today not because we're special," Tom said, "but because we were given a chance. And we believe that every child in Nigeria deserves that same chance." Jack continued, "That's why we've dedicated our lives to helping others. Because we know that when you lift up one person, you lift up an entire community." The audience listened in rapt attention. Many were moved to tears by the brothers' story and their message of hope and perseverance. After the ceremony, as Tom and Jack were preparing to return home, they were approached by a group of young people. These were students from a nearby university, and they had been inspired by the brothers' speech. "We want to help," said one of the students. "We want to volunteer at your orphanage and in your community programs. Can you teach us how to make a difference like you have?" Tom and Jack were thrilled. They spent hours talking with the students, sharing their experiences and giving advice. By the time they left the capital, they had made arrangements for a new volunteer program that would bring university students to their village regularly to help with various projects. On the journey home, Tom and Jack reflected on all that had happened. They thought about their parents, and how proud they would have been to see what their sons had accomplished. They thought about the magical pot and cane, and wondered if there were other magical objects out there, helping other children in need. As their car approached their village, they saw a group of children playing by the roadside. The children waved excitedly when they recognized Tom and Jack's car. The brothers waved back, their hearts full of joy. "You know, Jack," said Tom, "I think this is the real magic. Not talking pots or flogging canes, but the ability to bring hope and happiness to others." Jack nodded in agreement, "And the best part is, it's a magic that anyone can learn to use." As they drove into the village, they saw the changes they had helped bring about over the years. The old, run-down houses had been repaired or replaced. There was a new school, a clinic, and a community center. People looked healthier and happier. Tom and Jack knew their work wasn't done. There would always be more people to help, more improvements to make. But as they looked at each other, they felt a deep sense of satisfaction. They had taken the hardships of their youth and turned them into a force for good. That night, as they sat on the porch of their family home, watching the sun set over the village, Tom and Jack made a toast. Not with palm wine or champagne, but with simple glasses of water. "To Mom and Dad," said Tom. "To the magical pot and cane," added Jack. "And to the magic of kindness," they said together. As darkness fell and the stars came out, the brothers sat in comfortable silence, grateful for their journey and excited for whatever adventures tomorrow might bring. Answer: the story of Tom and Jack, the two orphans who became the pride of their village and an inspiration to their country, came to a close. But in many ways, it was just the beginning. For the seeds of kindness and hope they had planted would continue to grow, touching lives far beyond their little village, for generations to come. In the years that followed, Tom and Jack's story spread far and wide. It was told in schools and universities, inspiring young people to believe in themselves and to work hard for their dreams. It was discussed in government offices, reminding politicians and civil servants of the duty to serve the people, especially the most vulnerable. The brothers never sought fame or recognition for themselves. They continued to live in their village, running their businesses and the charitable programs with the same dedication they had always shown. But their impact was felt across Nigeria and beyond. Other villages and towns began to adopt their model of community development. The volunteer program they had started with the university students grew into a nationwide initiative, with young people from all over Nigeria coming to learn from Tom and Jack and then returning to their own communities to implement what they had learned. As they grew older, Tom and Jack began to think about the future. They had never married or had children of their own, having devoted their lives to their work and to the children they helped through their programs. But they knew their work needed to continue even after they were gone. So they set up a foundation, which they named after their parents. The foundation would continue their charitable work and manage their businesses, with all profits going to help underprivileged children and communities. They trained a group of young people from their village and from their programs to take over the running of the foundation. These were people who had grown up seeing the brothers work firsthand, who understood their vision and shared their values. On their 70th birthday, Tom and Jack held a big celebration in the village. People came from all over Nigeria to attend. There was music and dancing, speeches and tears. The brothers looked around at all they had accomplished, at all the lives they had touched, and felt a deep sense of peace. As the party was winding down, a young girl approached them. She was about the same age they had been when they first found the magical pot. "Uncle Tom, Uncle Jack," she said, for all the children in the village called them uncle, "I want to thank you for everything you've done for us. When I grow up, I want to be just like you." Tom and Jack smiled at her. "You can be even better," said Tom. "You have opportunities we never had at your age. Just remember," added Jack, "the most important thing is not how much money you make or how famous you become. It's how many lives you touch, how much kindness you spread in the world." The girl nodded solemnly, taking their words to heart. As she ran off to join her friends, Tom turned to Jack. "Do you ever wonder what happened to that magical pot and cane?" he asked. Jack chuckled. "Sometimes," he said, "but you know what? I think they're still out there somewhere, helping other children who need them. Just like we're still here, helping in our own way." Tom nodded. "You're right," he said. "And in the end, isn't that the greatest magic of all? The magic of one person helping another, of hope outlasting despair, of love conquering hate." "It sure is, brother," said Jack. "It sure is." And with that, the two brothers, once orphans, now revered elders, stood up and walked slowly back to their home. Behind them, the sounds of laughter and music filled the air, a testament to the joy they had brought into the world. As they reached their front door, they both paused and looked back at the village, at the life they had built from nothing. In that moment, they could almost imagine they saw two shimmering figures in the distance, a pot and a cane, standing watch over the village. But then they blinked, and the figures were gone. Real or imagined, it didn't matter. Tom and Jack knew that the real magic had always been inside them, and inside every person who chooses kindness over cruelty, hope over despair, and love over hate. And that magic, they knew, would live on long after they were gone, in the hearts and actions of all those whose lives they had touched.